AFR On Demand is brought to you by Breck Golf. Try Beaver Creek today, just 20 minutes from downtown Baton Rouge in the Zachary area. They've got a PGA Tour driving range, a short game practice area, 30 to 40-yard practice shots. It's a great place to chip and putt and practice if you don't have time for a full round. Book your tee time today, golf.breck.org, golf.breck.org. All right, we're here. Glad you are as well. 5 o'clock quitting time. Glad you're driving home with us. The single giant story around intercollegiate athletics, of course, conference realignment, the second big round, the first a decade ago. And the guy who was at the forefront of all of that news a decade ago is with us now, Chip Brown from Horns 247. Chip, great to have you back on the show. Thank you for a couple of minutes. How are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Very well. Probably not quite as busy as you are on this day. Let me start with last Wednesday and pick it up there. When we all got the news that was leaked, I guess through the Houston Chronicle, that Texas and OU were interested in joining the Southeastern Conference, your reaction to that last week was what?
Well, I'd heard there were some conversations going on with the SEC, but I thought it might be about merging the Big 12 and the SEC to, get everything moving toward the top 60, 64 schools, breaking away from the NCAA. But obviously, as it turns out, it was more about Texas and Oklahoma making that move to the SEC. And so, things are moving. Things are moving quickly. Obviously, Texas and Oklahoma notified the Big 12 earlier today. They will not be renewing their grant of rights when that expires in 2025. And I've been told the process of Texas and Oklahoma, making their overture to the SEC, to their application, whatever, will move quickly. So I think that, everyone should be ready for more news soon because, I think this train is rolling.
Chip, the grant of rights that you mentioned expire in 2025. The joint statement from Texas and Oklahoma said that the two schools plan to honor that, provided the landscape doesn't change. From your observation, what are the chances that something does change, meaning the Big 12 dissolves and this move happens prior to 2025?
Right. I mean, if the Big 12 dissolves and decides, say, to merge with the Pac-12 or schools start getting picked off, then this, could become effective immediately, depending on if the conference dissolves. If the conference stays together, tries to add schools, then things get a little more complicated. But still, we've seen situations like this get settled in the past so that both sides can move on. But the Big 12 has indicated it plans to hold Texas and Oklahoma to the bylaws of the conference, which would indicate a long, drawn-out process. But, the TV partners are going to have a lot of say in this. And if the Big 12 doesn't attract any eyeballs with adding schools like Cincinnati, Houston, Memphis, Central Florida, then the remaining 8 schools have, some hard decisions to make. So that's all happening right now as well. I mean, everybody's sort of trying to figure out what's best, and it's playing out as we speak.
Chip Brown is with us, Horns 247. He's on Twitter at Chip Brown 247. Chip, I mentioned already several times, you were the guy 10 years ago who was at the forefront of realignment. I mean, it seemed like every story, regardless of what school or conference it involved, you were the guy breaking all of the news. So with that perspective, how does what you covered 10 years ago compare or not to what is happening and might happen right now?
Well, I think, there are more players in this than just Texas. I think Texas was sort of the centerpiece of realignment the last, 10 years ago. when, the Big Ten said they were looking at expansion and Missouri said that they'd be interested, it sort of caused everyone to go figure out where they were going to land. And Texas was sort of an axis point in certainly the conversations with the Pac-10. And so at that point, sort of how Texas went was how the Big 12 was going to go. Obviously, they didn't end up going to the Pac-10. The TV partners stepped up and increased the payout to keep the conference together, which lasted a year. And then A&M and Missouri went off to the SEC, and TCU and West Virginia came in. So, now you've got, the SEC is the one kind of calling the shot on if Texas and Oklahoma are going to be admitted. So that's the next step. And then we wait to see what happens with the Big 12 and how quickly Texas and Oklahoma can be assimilated into the SEC. I think certainly Texas fans are ready for it to happen right now. And this is a game of chess. Lawyers are involved. So, it feels a lot like 10 years ago, though.
You do expect, though, that Texas and Oklahoma will be granted admission to the SEC by the league presidents?
That's what I'm hearing. I mean, barring unforeseen circumstances, A&M is certainly, voiced its concern. They want to be the only school from Texas in the SEC, but I think the SEC presidents see the greater good of adding two big brands like Texas and Oklahoma and what that could do even more financially and from just a super conference profile. And so I think the votes are there.
Do you know at this point, Chip, who reached out first? Was it just take that? Was it the schools, Texas and Oklahoma, conspiring? I don't even know if I should say conspiring. That has a negative connotation. But did they collaborate to reach out to the SEC, or was this initiated by the conference?
Well, Oklahoma had knocked on the SEC's door several times over the years under David Boren, the president, the past president. And then, when Joe Harris took over as president of Oklahoma, and the caveat from the SEC was, well, can you bring Texas? And then, when Joe Harris took over as president of OU, I think he suddenly had a much more willing partner in UT President Jay Hartzell and UT Regents Chairman Kevin Eltife, a former Texas senator who is, got a reputation as a consensus builder, a really shrewd politician. And so I think they finally saw eye to eye. The previous regime at Texas was not, the president was a Cal graduate and was sort of fascinated with the idea of Texas, being in the Pac-10. And so, the timing was right. And I think UT officials felt like this is the best place to maximize everything from meaning the SEC, maximize name, image, likeness for student athletes, maximize recruiting, maximize visibility, and that it was the right place to be when even, more changes are coming to college athletics, whether it's streaming companies like Amazon and Apple, getting involved or a breakaway from the NCAA. And I think Texas just felt like, and Oklahoma felt like the SEC was the bigger, better platform to be in when those changes come. Plus, from a fan standpoint, the home schedule just wasn't as appetizing in the Big 12 because they play Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl every year. So that's not a home game. The home games are, Kansas State, Iowa State, and that certainly doesn't get the fan base as excited as LSU, Alabama, Florida.
Needless to say. Chip, how last thing for you, your time much appreciated. I'm going to operate under the assumption Texas and Oklahoma are joining the SEC and likely in 2023. I just think they're going to find a way to get that done. How does the rest of college football look? How does this all shake out as the other power conferences need to react to what the SEC, Texas, and Oklahoma have done here?
Well, this feels a little bit like a sideways step because the most money is if the Power Five comes together, the top 60, 64 break away from the NCAA, form their own governing body, and collectively bargain their media rights and sell them off in pieces like the NFL does. That's where the most money is. That is where the autonomy conferences can truly have autonomy. And, they would have passed a stipend for name, image, likeness months ago, maybe even a year ago, if they could get it through the NCAA. But that's just not something the entire voting membership of the NCAA is ever going to approve because only the top 60, 64 schools can afford to do it. Now we've got legislation that, the NCAA doesn't want to regulate because they don't want to get sued. And so you just have to have visionary leadership. You need a college football commissioner who can have a great relationship with all the college presidents. It's a lot. And, when you see something like Texas and Oklahoma headed to the SEC, it makes you wonder, okay, well, how many schools are going to be part of the breakaway when it happens? Is it going to be 32? Is it going to be 42? Or, who's going to, be in a chair when the music stops? And that's the part that's, sort of fascinating to me is that you could be on the outside looking in 3 or 4 years when you thought you were in good shape. I mean, I'm talking about the 8 schools in the Big 12 right now that are trying to figure things out. All of this is sad in a lot of ways because, you got Oklahoma State's president putting out a statement today, feeling like they got backstabbed by OU and it's, even when Texas and Texas A&M stopped playing, 100-year rivalry, they talk about each other in each other's fight song. I mean, it's crazy when, this is like the AFC South negotiating a TV deal and taking teams from the NFC West. And at some point, college football, the big players, the top schools in college football need to come together and operate like the farm system of the NFL, which it is. And so, the question is, who's going to provide that kind of leadership? Is it Greg Sankey? Is it someone else? But Nick Saban was right when he said we need a college football commissioner. We absolutely do, because it's crazy that college football kind of cannot get on the same page yet in terms of supporting each other and marketing itself as a big, awesome brand. I mean, if you had 64 schools and you sold off the media rights like the NFL, you would have more revenue than the NFL. Now, running herd on 64 schools and keeping all those entities connected would be a tremendous undertaking, but I mean, someone's got to have the vision to be able to do it. And I guess we're waiting for that to emerge.
It's going to happen in my lifetime and yours, and today's news brought us one step closer. He is Chip Brown. Very generous with your time, man. I know you're swamped, but thanks for squeezing us in today.
Okay, you got it.